Alright, hi everybody. Today we're going to be working on a Trek Bontrager Boost 148 rear hub. We're taking this thing apart and rebuilding it so that it works alright. Before we get started, I want to show you some of the tools that you're going to need today to get started. First off, you're going to need a cone wrench. These are identified by how thin they are. This is a 17 millimeter. And you're going to need either another spanner or kind of a regular 17-inch there. Adjustable wrench. You're going to need a 14 millimeter hex key. You're going to need some needle nose pliers. You're going to need a rubber mallet. You're going to need some kind of long, and this thing, is about 10 inches. Either a screwdriver or a rod or something that you can knock the bearings out of the hub with, and of course your socket set, and then a large socket here. The size doesn't matter. We're going to use this to knock the bearings back in place. And you're going to need some kind of contraption that will let you support the hub of the wheel while you work on it without rubbing it on the ground. This is my old press fit bottom bracket. It works amazing for working on rear hubs. So that's what you're going to need for this project. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, to get started, you're going to need to take both the disc brake rotor off as well as the cassette. Assume you already know how to do that. If you do not, then this project is probably too complicated, and you should take your rear wheel to your local bike shop. So the first thing we're going to do is take these caps off of the end of the hub, and we want to focus on the drive side. So we're going to take our spanners, our wrenches here, put them on here, and it's not too difficult of situation. Just pop that nut right off of there. There should be a washer right underneath there, and then we've got a ring underneath here, and this one's a little bit tricky. It's underneath the level of the Freehub body, which means that our spanner's gonna have a hard time getting in there and getting enough bite on it, which means we're gonna have to do a little monkeying to get this to sit right. Okay, and so in order to get enough leverage inside of here to open it, I'm going to take my spanner and I'm going to pinch it in my adjustable wrench like this, and then I'm going to grab the teeth like this, and the adjustable wrench will give me the adjustable wrench will give me the leverage I need, and then I'm going to torque it from the other side. And when that happens, then I'm going to get it loosened up, and then I can grab my fingers in there and spin that out. And so you just work it off of there, and once you get it off of there, the axle itself should be ready to come off. So just push it like this. And there you go. Now we've removed the axle, and what you have here is a view of the non-drive side bearing, and you can see down inside the cassette here. So our next step is to knock the non-drive side bearing off. Okay, the non-drive side bearing is actually in there pretty good, and so we're going to take this. If you have a screwdriver, or mine is this rod that I have, we're going to stick it in from the drive side until it touches the back of the bearing here. And if you're unsure, you can go ahead and stick it all the way through just to make sure that you've got the back side of the bearing there. And then you can reach through here, and you're just going to give it some good swift hits with your rubber mallet to see if you can get it to pop out. And you want to work at the top and then the bottom, and there it is. That bearing just came flying out of there. All right, so one of the reasons we had to take that bearing out of there is because we need to get to the back side of the Freehub, which is how we're going to get it out, and that bearing was limiting us. So I'm going to take my 14mm hex key and I'm going to stick it in the back here, and try to fish it in there until I can get it to connect. Now, in order to remove this, we need to remember that this is reverse thread. And so if it's really tight and you're confused and you're, which way you're supposed to turn it or whatever, you got to remember that righty-tighty and lefty-loosey, except this is reverse of that. So turning it to the left is going to be loosening it. So that means that if you're standing over the wheel like I am, the drive side on your left side, you're going to push down. And it might be a little tight at first, and then it should break loose. And so once it originally breaks loose, then you can actually just open it up by hand, and there is the Freehub body. And you can see here, this thing has got some play in it. We need to get that play taken care of. But now our hub is pretty much completely open, and we're ready to start servicing the parts of it. Okay, now that you have your Freehub body off, the next thing we're going to do is remove this rubber gasket in here. And for that, you're going to need a little bit of a wider flat blade screwdriver. You're just going to stick it right up underneath there, like that, and give it a little bit of a pull back, and you'll start to see it come off. You can rotate a little bit, see if that will help you get it loose, and it should pop right on out. And then go ahead and set that aside, and you can see what we have now here is the inner bearing, and check and make sure that that's flowing freely and good to go. Now, this poses a problem in that you can see where the bearing kind of connects in there, but there's a sleeve, and usually what we do is bang this bearing out from the back side, but if you look down in there, you can see, man, there is a very little edge there, and almost impossible to get an edge of a screwdriver or something on there to bang the bearing out, which means that we're going to need to pull it. And you've got a couple of options here. The easiest one is to take it to your local bike store and use a bearing puller, or if you've got a bearing puller. I don't have one of those, and so I went to the hardware store and I found one of these kind of wedge style cement anchors, and this thing is great. It'll slide right up in here, and then when I turn this, it will cause the sleeve to expand, and it will grab the inside of the bearing, and then I'll be able to punch it out from the back side. So I'm going to go ahead and set this and punch it out and show you what we have going on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is basically take this and I'm going to hand tighten it, and that should start spreading this thing apart, and then I'm going to slide it down inside of here, and it's not quite tight enough, and so what I'm going to do is have to grab the outside of this with a pair of pliers and then do some more hand tightening. And what that's going to do is grab now the inside of the bearing, and the cool thing is that what this is going to do is allow me to actually pop this thing out by punching it through from the back side. You're going to need that piece of PVC pipe, or like I'm using here, this old bottom bracket, some way to support the, move the camera back here to get a better angle, some way to support this, because what we're going to do now is bang it out from the top. Okay, so we're ready to give it a few more whacks. Put the screwdriver in there to the top. Make sure that you're hitting only on your bolt, and you can see that worked a charm. And grabbed the bearing there and pulled it right on out, no problems at all. And that will show us what's underneath here. And you can see that what we have in here now is a sleeve that has got these edges here on the side. And so we're going to use the needle nose pliers to grab those and unscrew this and then see what else is down in there. Okay, so in order to get enough leverage, I have to put this back in the wheel for now. What I'm going to do is then take these needle nose pliers and find those slots in there until I get it to connect up. And then I'm going to twist until I can get it to break loose. See, it came loose. Need to say this just so you can hear it. It'll be written there on the screen too. This is reverse thread. Okay, so now once you get it like this, you actually want to be real careful because we're not sure what's in there yet, and what you don't want to do is lose the insides of it as you take it open. You have to pull those and then replace them. So it's going to come apart like that. It's ball bearings all down inside there, and this thing is so dry, just totally worn out. Which should explain why it's got all that movement down inside of there. Okay, getting ready to start put this thing back together, and I want to show you this is the inside and this is the outside. Okay, and this is going to sit down in here like this, and I want to do my best to keep the pawls free from grease. So I've applied grease here in the bearing race, and this here is the part that screws down in here. I had a lot of trouble getting that out, and it's the other bearing grease. So what I'm going to do is set it like this and grease it, and then I'm going to put 25 of those little balls here, and I'm going to put 25 of the little balls here. Then I'm going to put this in here, flip it upside down, and then put this in. But I want to try to keep grease away from the snapping action of the pawls there. If you've got grease in there, like a heavy grease, it'll keep your pawls from snapping back. Okay, when you get your Freehub all put back together, it's time to start putting your wheel back together. To do this, we're going to start by reinstalling or pressing the bearing that goes inside the driver's side here. And so all we're going to do, set it down in there, and then with our thumbs kind of get it started. Doesn't take much. And then what we're going to do is take a large socket that we need to be at least as big as the bearing itself, that will cover both the inside and the outside edges of the bearing. And then we're just going to smack the top of this with a rubber mallet. You can use a bearing press, obviously that's a better way to go, but this works pretty well. So I'm going to hold on to the bottom here and then just smack it hard. You can see the bearing sat down in there. It's nice and flush. It still feels good. I think we're ready to put this back into the wheel. Okay, after you get the bearing installed here, it's time to put this in the hub. You want to install your Freehub before you install the non-drive side bearing. That is because we access this through the back side here, and with the bearing in, we can't get to it. Now remember, there's a collar that goes down in here. That collar looks like this. And so we're going to put our finger down in here and try to get that started. And this uses a 14mm hex key that we can help us put down in there and spin it so that we can get the collar going and get it to stick on there. I can't reach it, so I'm gonna put an adapter on there so I can get in there a little bit better. Now remember, this is reverse thread, so we're gonna turn it clockwise to get it to sit down in there. And then when we got it hand tightened, then we got to get our wrench, the socket wrench here, and go ahead and tighten it down as best we can. We don't want to go too hard because we don't want to strip it out, but hard enough that all that pressure when you're pedaling and stuff isn't gonna cause it to come loose. And that's how we get the Freehub back on there, and now we're ready to install the non-drive side bearing. Okay, so in order to install the non-drive side bearing, you need to get a piece of plastic, PVC pipe. This is my old bottom bracket, which happens to work really perfectly, because we have to support the Freehub from the bottom like this, because we're gonna bang the bearing into there. I'm gonna take the bearing, just like we did before, get it started with our thumbs like that, and then we're gonna take this socket, wide diameter socket, and set it right here, and then we're just gonna give the top of this a couple of good whacks and get that bearing to set down in there. It might take a few whacks to get going. And that's it. The bearing is set down in there. Now we're ready to put the axle in. Okay, now we're ready to put the axle in, and we're going to start with the axle nearly stripped down except for this black cap at the end. And these Bontrager hubs are a little bit tricky, so you want to make sure that this black piece here is only hand tightened, because we're going to have to remove it for step 2. So step 1 is to insert it with that black cap on the non-drive side, and then you're going to take this little nut here, get a good look at it. We're going to screw it on here now. Okay, so the tricky part about this, you screw that all the way down with your fingers, and you'll feel it's about the right tension, maybe even a little too tight. But the problem is, and you can see, is that you cannot really grab that nut because it sits underneath, or it's below the rim of your Freehub here, and so there's nothing to get at. So in order to get the right tension here, what I'm going to have to do, now that I've got this side set, is actually unscrew the back side, and then pull it out so I can get at it. We've got a washer that goes on there, and then we've got the end cap that goes on there. And this end cap works with this other cap here to provide the right tension. And so the way that we get that set up right is we've got room here to work with our cone wrench. So we take the cone wrench and we put it on the inside one here like this, and then we take a normal box and wrench and we can put it here like this. And what we want to do is back this one out so that these two nuts tighten against each other. And that way it keeps them from coming loose when you're out riding and stuff. And I'm going to push that all the way in, and then take this black cap, screw it back on. Now you can see why we did that is because the black cap here I can easily get at with my cone wrench, and it also has a washer and a cap that goes on the top of it. Put the washer on there. We put the end cap on. Tighten that down, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to use a cone wrench on that black cap, and we're going to use a box wrench here, and then we're going to tighten those things down against each other, and then that gives us good tension here. The hub flows freely, but there's no wiggle in it, and that will ensure that your bearings last a long time. Now, there's one last thing that we didn't do, and that was install this rubber gasket. It's best if you do this before you put these caps on here, but I got eager about it. But it can just easily be pushed in. That will help keep water and gunk out of the bearings that are down inside of there. And once you get that pushed down in there, we literally are ready to put the cassette back on, tighten it up, and then put this thing on our bike. And that is how you take apart and rebuild the Boost 148 Trek Bontrager rear hub.